Despite a valiant effort by Mark Vientos, Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, all those Mets that homered in Game 2, this series is now tied as it heads back to New York. On the show today, I'll talk about what went wrong in Game 2 and what the Mets can clean up moving forward so that they can take down this very tough Phillies team.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com, Booking.yeah. The right state can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. The New York Mets were very close to making this a 2-0 series lead heading back to New York, where they would have been in complete command, one win away from the NLCS, and it just didn't happen. It's frustrating. Any loss in the playoffs is, but I look at the entirety of this game, and the things that I felt good about the Mets all showed up. Okay. At its core, at the core of the start, Luis Severino had a good outing. We'll talk about where it went wrong, but if he's used again in this series as a reliever in a potential Game 5, I still feel good about Severino's chances to help this team. The lineup: Mark Vientos, unbelievable. 3 extra base hits in this game, a double and 2 home runs. He's locked in. Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor. All of a sudden, there's a top 4 in this Mets lineup that I think opposing teams will fear. So that really showed through in this game. Unfortunately, the issue that we've known has been there, which is the bullpen, ended up biting the Mets in some ways. And we'll talk about that throughout the show. But I just want to say on the front end of this, that was a loss where, as upsetting as it still was because it's a loss in the playoffs, I came away saying, man, that was just a great baseball game. Back and forth. And I came away more just with a greater appreciation for the guys they have in that locker room over in Philly that aren't going to make it easy on the Mets. They're not going to just roll over in 3 games, clearly now. If the Mets can win this thing before it goes back to Philly, it will take fighting tooth and nail for the next 2 games to get the job done. That is a good team. Because through the first 6 innings, or nearly through the first 6 innings, the Mets were absolutely cruising through this game, and it really did look like it might be easy until Bryce Harper showed up in the bottom of the 6th inning. But let's talk about what happened before that. Luis Severino was dialed in. He looked outstanding through the first 5 innings, really through the first 5 2/3. Through the first 5, 64 pitches is all he needed. He gave up 4 hits, did not walk any, struck out 6. He was touching 99 when he needed it. He was living in the upper 90s. He was pitching to contact at times. He was getting guys to chase. He was just doing everything you could ask for. Luis Severino looked like prime Sevy back in his days with the Yankees. He looked like a borderline ace. He was outstanding, and he got some run support. Mark Vientos at the first of his 2 home runs in the 3rd inning. Lindor got on in front of him. Vientos comes through, cashes him in, hits an opposite field home run. Mets up 2-0. Then in the top of the 6th inning, Pete Alonso tacked on another, hit a solo shot to lead things off. So the Mets lineup did their job against a tough pitcher in Christopher Sanchez. They got some runs on the board. Great. Severino, like I said, was cruising. When he got the first 2 outs of the 6th, I was already envisioning not just 7 innings out of Sevy. I was thinking, damn, Severino, he might just mess around and get through 8. I mean, he was that good. He gets ahead on Bryce Harper. Well, actually, first things first, he gives up a base hit to Trey Turner. Hung a sweeper, Turner gets on. So then comes the big at-bat that changed the game. Bryce Harper gets ahead on him. He throws him a fastball that was basically down the middle. Alvarez was set up and away. He's supposed to get that pitch out of the zone. Hope that Harper, trying to protect, is going to chase it. That's where you want that pitch. If you throw it 6 inches above the zone and you get it on the black, which I guess he kind of got it close to the black, but man, he pulled that fastball down because he was trying to throw it hard. I mean, I think it might have even been 99 miles per hour. But what happens there, sometimes as a pitcher, when you got a Bryce Harper standing there, right? Your natural reaction is, I'm going to throw this thing as hard as I can. I'm going to throw it by him. But you're not going to throw a fastball by Bryce Harper. You need to locate that pitch. Unfortunately, he doesn't. Pulls it down a little bit and ends up, right there in Harper's wheelhouse. Instead of being up and away, it's more just middle away, if not a little bit low, middle to low away. And Harper just all over it. So there you go. All of a sudden, a 3-0 game where the Mets were in complete command turns into a 3-2 game. Then he doesn't flush it. Nick Castellanos comes up. You can't throw Castellanos to strike, honestly. If you throw it in the zone, he's going to hit it. If you throw it outside the zone, he's going to get himself out. And he throws a hanging sweeper. Castellanos hits a home run. All of a sudden, tie ball game. Here's where I still look at the Mets and I come away from this game not that upset and still very confident. Citizens Bank was dead. Okay, Severino, like I said, cruising. The Mets had a lead from the third inning on. From the point that Vientos hit that 2-run homer until Bryce Harper hit his, it was dead silent. The Mets had gone to hostile territory. They had taken game 1, and they were well on their way to take game 2. Phillies fans had their heads in their hands. They were thinking, oh my God, this incredible team, this incredible season, it's going to end. They were feeling that anxiety. And if the Mets get through that 6th inning, maybe they win. But the Phillies battle back. The crowd's in it now. The crowd's fired up. All the momentum has swung Phillies' way. You would have thought, even though Severino got out of that inning, that the next time the Phillies came up, they were just going to tack on more runs and they were going to win it. Next inning, right, the next half inning, Francisco Lindor and Mark Vientos did not have good at-bats. They each strike out. Brandon Nimmo comes up, and I feel so confident when he steps in the box right now because this is a guy who's locked in, who has a great approach. He's getting himself into good counts, and he's putting his best swing on it. And when you do that, good things can happen. And so Nimmo gets ahead 2-0. He looks at a backdoor sweeper for the first strike. You don't want that pitch. What does the reliever do? I think was it Kerkering at that point? I don't even remember who was pitching, but regardless, he goes right back to that backdoor sweeper, but just off the plate. The thought is Nimmo just looked at a called strike. Now he's going to be more apt to swing. You throw it a little bit more outside the zone, have him chase. Now you're even in the count. Nimmo keeps the bat on his shoulder, gets into a 3-1 count. Finally gets a pitch in the zone, fastball or a sinker. He crushes it. 108 miles per hour off the bat, hits a home run, and all of a sudden he silences the crowd again. That was such a huge moment for the Mets. Now, they still had to get 6 outs. They survived the 7th inning. We'll talk about the pitching more in the next segment. 8th inning, eventually with Diaz staying on for getting a big strikeout to close the 7th. Things go wrong for him. He walks Bryce Harper, gives up a hit to Nick Castellanos. Then Bryson Stott hits a triple. That flips the game in the Phillies' favor. McGill comes in. When it's all said and done and the dust is settled, what was a 4-3 Mets lead turned into a 6-4 Mets deficit with only 6 outs, they were 6 outs away from winning. They only have 3 outs to play with at that point. So you go from 4-3 lead, get 6 outs, and you're going to go home with a victory too. All right, now you're down by 2. And you only have 1 inning to get back in the game. Francisco Lindor, Bader led off and struck out. Francisco Lindor comes up, falls behind 0-2, fouls off a tough pitch, and then gets a base hit on a ball that was not a bad pitch. I mean, up and out of the zone. Lindor just gets on top of it, hits a hard ground ball, finds a hole, gets on base, and passes the baton to Mark Vientos, who had the hot bat in this game. And Vientos put together just a great at-bat. He falls behind 1-2, looks at 2 balls in the dirt. And what you have to understand, too, and I think Vientos is getting there, you got to understand that, especially in the playoffs, and you see it on the other side with the Mets, the last thing you want is to give really good hitters a chance on pitches in the zone. So when they get ahead in the count, they're going to stay away from you. And Vientos was patient. He got himself into a full count, and he gets one that's sort of up and out of the zone, but he had fouled off for the second strike a fastball that was actually kind of center cut, but he was on that pitch. He was on it. He just missed it. So then you get a fastball up and out of the zone, and Vientos turns on it and pulls it to left center field and hits a home run, a towering shot. He gets crazy carry on the baseball. And all of a sudden, the New York Mets are right back in the game. They tied it up. So to see the way that they battled back, to see Mark Vientos, who just has so much power, and when he's locked in like he is now, it's like 8 for 20 in the playoffs, it's such a tough at bat for these pitchers because Vientos is learning how to lay off the tough pitches and get himself into good counts. And he is so strong. He can, miss-hit a baseball and drive it out of the ballpark. He just is one of those guys that's able to get a lot of air under the ball, and he just hits the ball so hard that he does damage. And so to see him come through in this way, the moment is not too big for him, that's huge for this team. And I really credit these guys for getting back in the game multiple times. The problem is the Phillies had great at-bats too, and they got the job done. What I want to talk about in the next segment is where things went wrong for the Mets in this game. Obviously, it falls on the pitchers, particularly the bullpen that just couldn't get those final outs. Where did Mendoza go wrong? Where did the pitchers go wrong? We're going to talk about all of that in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Arena Club. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on that Ellie De La Cruz rookie year, the Luka Doncic, it's just not in the cards for us, right? I love collecting, but that's some serious money to drop. And I'm not willing to spend that way. But thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, it's now possible to score gem mints for a fraction of the retail price. I've now been able to get back into the game with collecting. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards and clear hit rates for each one. So with Arena Club slab packs, they're going to revolutionize, or they are revolutionizing, the repack game with transparency. Okay, after you have your pulls revealed, they're immediately placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, it's fast, it's transparent with a full grade rationale provided and an explanation of how your card was scored, whether you're into buying, selling, or displaying. Arena Club is the card collecting platform you have to check out. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnMLB and use the code LockedOnMLB. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnMLB. The code is LockedOnMLB for 10% off your first purchase. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. We got to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the season, so now maybe let's get to 11,000 by the end of the playoffs. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, so let's talk about where things went wrong for the New York Mets in this game. Obviously, you can look at Severino, right? He's cruising. He has to face Bryce Harper, and that's a big thing in this series. Harper's dangerous. He's one of the best playoff performers of the past decade, especially the last 2 years. He has had just some exceptional runs with the Phillies, and this is a guy that if you just look at all the players in this series and you think about Hall of Famers, there's really two guys actually in this series that I think fit that billing for sure, and that is Bryce Harper and Francisco Lindor. And there's other guys like a Trey Turner that, who knows, across their entire career, maybe they get there. But it really is those two guys that have their legacy on the line. And Harper's been going out a little bit longer than Lindor, and he still doesn't have that ring. So all these games for him are so important because it validates his legacy. He is the biggest problem the Mets face in this series. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next segment because I think they have to rely on some guys that you wouldn't typically want to, but you have to find a way to get the job done here. In this game, you have Severino facing off against Harper, and again, he just gives him too good of a pitch to hit. And that home run turns the game around. But with Nick Castellanos, again, you can't throw him a strike, hangs a sweeper, and there you go. It's a tie ball game. Now in the 7th inning, Jose Butto comes on. And I felt good about Butto. I know his last appearance wasn't great, but his first one in the playoffs was. And this is a guy that, for the most part, has been rock solid this year. Now, you really look at what happened. He hits JT Realmuto with a pitch. He gets Brendan Marsh out. He gets Alec Boehm out. So there's 2 outs in the inning, a runner on. And then Cody Clemens gets an infield single on a ball that he hit like 77 miles per hour off the bat. It wasn't well struck. It wasn't Butto not executing. It was just a well-placed ground ball for the Phillies. Because of that, that leads to Edwin Diaz coming on to close out that 7th inning and get out of that rally because the top of the lineup was coming up. And I don't fault Carlos Mendoza for going that route. He doesn't trust Danny Young. And we'll talk about Danny Young in the next segment, but he doesn't trust the one lefty that he has to get Schwarber out in that spot. He's too nervous that Schwarber is going to hit a 3-run homer, and all of a sudden the game completely goes into the Phillies' favor. So when you have the top of the lineup coming up in the 7th inning in a big spot with runners on, yeah, you go to Edwin Diaz, and Diaz got the strikeout that he needed. Then in the 8th, he struck out Trey Turner. Here's where I think the Mets lost the game. They're too scared of Bryce Harper. They are. Now, yes, Harper can kill you, and he did in this game. But if Bryce Harper's going to hit 2 home runs, and that's the reason why you lose, that's the reason why you lose. You have Edwin Diaz dialed. The first 2 batters. I felt like he was locating his pitches well enough, and he was nasty. But then you say, all right, pitch around Harper. And Bryce Harper, as much as he wants to be the hero, he trusts Nick Castellanos behind him. He trusts Bryson Stott. He trusts the guys in his lineup to get the hits required to get the job done. Because as much as it feels like it's easier for Bryce Harper to hit that home run that would have tied the game, for one, that doesn't give the Phillies a lead. And 2, it might not be easier than stringing a couple hits together after taking your free base. So Harper's not going to get himself out. He looks at 4 pitches. He's on first. You have to attack him. You have to. It's Edwin Diaz. Edwin Diaz should not be intentionally walking anyone. I know it wasn't intentional, but he shouldn't be pitching around anyone with the bases clear. I'm sorry. If there was a runner on second base, absolutely. Just put up 4 fingers. Put him on first. But Edwin Diaz had struck out the first 2 batters that he faced. He's got to be confident that he can strike out Bryce Harper. And the Mets have to not, go to the mound and say, hey, we're going to pitch around Harper here. No, attack him. Attack him. Because you know what? Worst thing that happens, he hits a home run. Oh, well. Then you compose yourself. Bases are clear. You get after Nick Castellanos. Instead, you walk Harper. Now you're pitching with a runner on base. Edwin Diaz, it's a free base. They can steal at will. He's got that in the back of it. It's so much easier for him to have given up a solo homer, if it comes to that, to lock back in and focus on the hitter. But instead, you have him intentionally missing the zone, and now he's got to try to lock it back in. And then, okay, Castellanos gets a hit, and then Bryson Stott hits the triple, and now you're out of it. It's just, you cannot fear Bryce Harper to the point that it cripples you. And I get not wanting Harper to beat you. I get that. When they walked him in the 9th inning with Tyler McGill, that one made sense to me. It did. But with the bases clear, I just felt they should have gone after Harper. And instead, you don't, and I get it. And so it's all right, let's get Castellanos. But, he just throws him 2 fastballs, Castellanos, that were in the same spot up in the zone. And, Castellanos is a good hitter. He got the job done. And then with Bryson Stott, it's a full count. You got pressure. There's runners on base. Last thing you want is to walk the bases loaded. Gives him a slider, and it ends up over the heart of the plate, and Bryson Stott rips it into the corner for a triple. And not to say that's ball game because the Mets got back in it, but that was the killing rally. Had they gone after Harper, I think it might have been different. Now, the Mets go to Tyler McGill after Diaz had blown it. He gets a soft ground ball to Mark Vientos. Vientos can't make the play. Stott was going on contact. That ended up being the insurance run for the Phillies, which they needed because Vientos tied the game in the next half inning, making up for his, I think they ruled it an error, but, play that he could have made. I kind of actually wish that Francisco Lindor would have called him off and taken charge, because the ground ball was close enough to Lindor that maybe if he just yells, "I got it," and like just charges in full speed, he can grab the ball and on a run, make the throw to the plate and get that runner out. But, it's asking a lot for him to do that. Regardless, though, the first place where I think the Mets lost this game was not pitching to Harper with Edwin Diaz. That was or the Severino mistakes. I guess the Severino mistakes were first, and then not pitching to Harper, leading to that big inning in the eighth. McGill stays on for the ninth. Have no problem with it. Gets the first 2 outs. He walks Trey Turner. Can't do that. Okay, you got to just – if Trey Turner beats you, Trey Turner beats you. You can't put a runner on for Bryce Harper. At that point, they're going to pitch around Harper. Now you have 2 runners on for Castellanos, and again, Castellanos is a good hitter. McGill got ahead of 1 and 2, and he threw a pitch in the zone. Can't give him a pitch to hit. Got to bury a couple sliders and see if he gets himself out. He doesn't, and Castellanos comes through. But I look at this game, and again, the lineup was so impressive. Severino was impressive for stretches. Just had 1 bad inning, a couple bad batters. And then I thought McGill looked really good out of the bullpen. I do. Yes, he blows it ultimately, but that was going up against a really tough lineup that executed against him. Edwin Diaz obviously didn't pitch great. I think they should have had him attack Harper because he had gotten the first 2 guys out via strikeouts. I would have liked him to try to continue that momentum, but it can't all be on Edwin Diaz. Edwin Diaz can't come into the game and get 7 outs. I mean, maybe when the World Series is on the line, but even then, you're asking a ton for him to have multiple up-downs potential. I mean, that's just too much. Now, I don't think there was ever any intent on getting Diaz through the 9th. I think the goal was to get him through the 8th and then go to McGill to close it if you had a 1-run lead. And if things had gone well, maybe McGill would have been facing the bottom of the lineup. I think that was how Carlos Mendoza scripted it in his head when he goes to Diaz to get that last out of the 7th. All right, he's going to face the top of the lineup. He's going to get Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, and Nick Castellanos out. And I'm going to hand the ball to McGill to face Bryson Stott. If everything breaks right, that's what you want. But the Mets need other guys outside of just Edwin Diaz to step up here. They have to rely on other guys. And the guy that I think they need in this series is one that you're all going to hate me saying, but this is a series where the New York Mets need Danny Young. I'm going to explain why. Don't jump at me just yet. I'm going to explain why in the next segment. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com, Booking.yeah. Explore the U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. We're talking about your rival cities. Or, you know what? If you're not in the New York area, if you don't live there, and you want to catch a couple of these great Mets games this week, use Booking.com with hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, so much more. Booking.com is the place to go where you might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city during the postseason. With Booking.com's wide variety of choices across the U.S., you can go incognito to all of your baseball rival city. No matter what team you're in for this postseason, use Booking.com to make you a fan of any city, from hotels that overlook the stadium to family-friendly resorts to cute bed and breakfasts. All of that is available at Booking.com. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can now start the season off with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can actually check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Again, go to FanDuel. You're going to place that first $5 bet and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's win or lose. It's guaranteed when you place that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sports book. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me. Anytime news breaks on the Mets, you can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways, and you get the lineup graphic sent to your phone each day, so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so first and foremost, before we talk about Danny Young, What do the Mets have to do to capitalize when they bring this series home and ultimately avoid having to go back to Philly? First and foremost, they got to hit. They got to hit against Aaron Nola. They got to hit against whoever they face in game 4. That is the way they're going to win this series, is with the bats. The bats are locked in. Their best players on this team are still the hitters. The pitchers have been amazing this year to give this team a chance, but this team ultimately, I believe, will live or die with their offense. If they keep hitting, I think they're going to win this series. If the bats go cold, that's going to be the issue. The other issue, of course, could be the bullpen, which is where the Mets absolutely need their ace this season, which has been Sean Manaea, to step up and look like it on Tuesday. They need 21 outs from Sean Manaea with a lead. That's what they got. They need Sean Manaea to get them to that 8th inning where you're very close to Edwin Diaz. And if you do that and you get that win, now game 4, you can throw everything at the Phillies. If you can get length out of Manaea and you can salvage some of those arms in your bullpen, maybe you only have to go to one of Maton Stanek or Garrett and the other two get to rest and you go to Edwin Diaz and you get the job done. All right, well, now you're golden. Or even better, you score a bunch of runs. Maybe you stay away from Edwin Diaz, give him 2 days off leading into game 4. But regardless, it's on the bats and it's on Manaea to get out to an early lead and hold it where it's only 6 outs. Maybe it's 7, 8 outs that you need to get from them. I want Manaea pitching in the 7th inning in this game. The Mets have gotten one great playoff start so far. One great one. And that was Jose Quintana. 6 shutout innings. Before that, you had Severino, game 1 of that series. It was solid, not exceptional, solid. Manaea against the Brewers, same thing, right? Just good, not great. Quintana was great. And then you had the bullpen game in game 1 of the NLDS here. And then Severino was great until he wasn't. And it ended up being a good start. Again, if you asked me to sign up for 6 innings, 3-run ball from Sevy going into the day, I would have said, yeah, absolutely, I'll sign up for that. But when you have a shutout going with 2 outs in the 6th inning, giving up those 3 runs, not as good. So the Mets need a starter to put it together wire to wire and get them length. Sean Manaea has to step up in game 3. I believe the Mets have an edge, Manaea over Nola, but Nola is a battle-tested playoff pitcher. So based on careers, Nola has been better. I just think Manaea has shown better stuff this year, and he could be dominant. Now, with that said, you also still have some guys who have thrown the ball well. Tyler McGill could be a weapon out of the pen. Reed Garrett looked good his last time. Maybe these guys can come through in this series, not to mention David Peterson. But there's 2 guys, if I'm not mistaken, we have not seen pitch yet in the playoffs that have been on this roster. That's Adam Ottavino and Danny Young. The Mets need to use Danny Young in this series, and that is scary because he has not been great. And I don't know if he's going to be able to rise to the moment. But this Phillies team with Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber, you need a lefty to be able to go up against the top of the lineup and get the job done late in games. If you're going to face that top of the lineup twice from the 7th inning on, or maybe it's the 6th inning on, depending on when your starting pitcher goes out, you can't just expect Edwin Diaz to get through that top of the lineup twice. It's not possible. So you need somebody else that can come into the 7th inning of a game and get the big strikeout. If the Mets trusted Danny Young, maybe they hold Edwin Diaz. It's Danny Young that goes out there to face Schwarber. He gets a big strikeout. You're in the dugout. You're feeling good. You keep him in the game potentially. Maybe he gets to a turnaround. Then he strikes out Bryce Harper. All of a sudden, maybe Danny Young is getting you through 2 innings, or maybe you're going to Edwin Diaz for the final 4 outs because it's a 4-3 game, and maybe he gets the job done. You're asking too much out of Edwin Diaz, and Danny Young in this series is the lefty that you have, and it's not like he's had no success this year. I get it. Recently, it's been bad. He's had some bad outings, and it's looked like the moment has gotten to him, so it's hard to trust him. But Danny Young has faced Bryce Harper 4 times this year, or at least 4 times in his career, but I think they all came this year. He struck him out 3 times. Other at-bat was a single. Harper's 1 for 4 with 3 Ks. You got to rely on him. Danny Young this year has held lefties to a 207 batting average against. Their slug against him, 224. Strangely enough, he has some crazy home road splits. I don't think that really is something I'd be too concerned about because he just gave up his home runs at Citi Field. That's why the ERA is inflated there. ERA at home 6.05, on the road 2.95. But I'm not really reading into that. Danny Young gets whiffs. He gets a lot of strikeouts. And when the ball's put in play, it's generally on the ground. They need him in this series. Okay, batters are hitting 113 against his sweeper this year. He's got a whiff percentage on that pitch of 51.6%. That is a great pitch. That is the pitch that you need to get Kyle Schwarber chasing out of the zone and to even get a Bryce Harper chasing out of the zone in a big spot. If you can get ahead and bury some sweepers, he might just get himself out. He might, because it's a nasty pitch. You look at Danny Young's season. First 10 appearances, he gave up just one earned run. One earned run. Had a rough week at the end of June. ERA went from 0.87 to 5.11. He comes back July 10th. Had 7 appearances in July where he did not give up a run, struck out 11, walked just 2, gave up only 4 hits. In August, he pitched to a 2.45 ERA. At one point, Danny Young had his ERA at 2.70 through his first 34 relief appearances. Over his final 8, that ERA ballooned all the way back up to 4.54. He struggled on the stretch, and I get it. You don't necessarily want to go to him. But let's just say the Mets are winning 7-1. Sean Manaea comes out of the game with 111 pitches, and it's the top of the lineup to lead off the 8th. Go to Danny Young. See what he has. Maybe he gets Schwarber to strike out. Maybe he gets Harper to strike out. Maybe that is a weapon you might have in your back pocket for Game 4 and Game 5 that you can go to Danny Young and have some confidence. He has really good stuff. I admit it hasn't been great lately. He is too erratic around the strike zone. He hits batters. He walks batters. He puts himself in a bad spot. But the Mets are in a position where you don't know what you have until you throw it. That's why I'd almost want to see Adam Ottavino work his way into one of these games, especially with his playoff experience, just because you need to know what you have, and you're going to need all these guys. The Mets can't just rely on Edwin Diaz. And yes, Reed Garrett, Phil Maton, Ryan Stanek, I get trusting them the most. I get trusting Jose Budo. But those other 2 guys are in the bullpen for a reason, and Danny Young has good stuff, and this is a lineup that has some tough lefties. And beyond that, right, think about who you could see next if the Dodgers advance. You can't have Edwin Diaz face off against Shohei Ohtani every time. If the Mets are going to make a run, go all the way through, you're going to see Juan Soto potential in the world. Like, there's a lefty in every series that you should fear. Even for the Royals, Vinny Pasquantino, for the Tigers, whatever it is, Kerry Carpenter. Like, you need to use that lefty reliever in your bullpen, or David Peterson cannot start throughout this playoff run, and you need Peterson to just put out fires as your top lefty out of the pen. That might be the way they have to use him. And maybe your 4 starting pitchers from this point on are Kodai Senga, Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, and Jose Quintana, and Peterson and McGill are coming out of the bullpen because you need their help. The Mets can get the job done. They can beat this Phillies team. They could jump all over Aaron Nola the way they did the last time they saw him. Sean Manaea can turn in a gem, and you could be up 2-1 with the chance to clinch in Game 4 in front of your fans. But also, the Phillies could score some runs off of Manaea. It could be close. It could turn into a bullpen game late. And if you don't have any options outside of Edwin Diaz, and Edwin Diaz can be erratic himself, you could all of a sudden be in a hole in this series. And I don't love the Mets' chances if they lose Game 3. I think they have to go out and win Game 3 so that they can clinch in 4. Or you take another punch from Philly, tough team, and you go back into the bank, and hopefully Zach Wheeler had to pitch on short rest in Game 4. But even if not, you've proven you can beat Zach Wheeler, and the Mets just have to get the job done. I still have faith in this team. I can't wait to watch the next game. We got 24 hours, day off to really sit on this. I will be doing a show with Connor Thomas. So we already talked before the series as the host of Locked On Phillies. We're going to get together again to lead you into Tuesday. Sort of the preview of that game should be a lot of fun. Make sure you tune into that. If you are watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you know if and when I ever go live after one of these games. If you are listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on X, Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day, now for your second watch. Head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel. Covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.